components and interacting with TC39. I know there was a thread about kind of how we interact with some of their initiatives. Any other agenda items that folks would like to cover today?
Okay, we are live on YouTube. Yay! And so thank you, Tierney, for saving my butt. And I imagine you're going to pop off now, but thank you. Have a good one. All right, so we are live on YouTube. All right, so right, what was it, Ben?
So we have a few issues that we have a few topics. Where's RimRaf sitting? Userland shims, which I think we didn't make a huge amount of progress with. Future meeting cadence. And someone from TC39 was interacting with us, trying to see if we could have more collaboration with their project. I was asking, are there any new agenda items that folks would like to bring up who are on the call? I have one, which is just an update about test coverage in Node.js core. Just been my ongoing obsession. Cool. Well, if no one else has any agenda items, I guess we just jump into the first one, which is RimRaf progress. Which, Chris, you probably have the most insight here.
I have absolutely no insight because that would have been Brian English's thing.
Okay. To me, it still seems like a great idea, but I think you basically had hit a bit of a wall where the performance was not worth the annoyance of implementing it in C++, was your opinion, right?
Essentially, yeah. So I had a C++ implementation of RimRaf that basically just went and it removed files and directories, but it did it in serial. So it would just do one at a time. It wouldn't say, spawn 4 threads or whatever to go delete 4 at a time. It would only do one at a time. And performance was, I would say, similar to userland RimRaf, and that's in some cases worse. So it's just that's not going to cut it. So the C++ implementation to spawn multiple threads and do all this stuff is number one, there's nothing quite like that that I saw anyway in Node Core. And the other concern is if you do a synchronous RimRaf, you may be in the same boat where you have to what was it, exec sync, where you have to basically fake being synchronous, and that just like adds another layer of being a headache. And so I feel like RimRaf, unless you are a C++ and systems programming wizard, is probably better implemented in JavaScript if we're going to pull it into core. I still think it belongs in core, but I'm not expecting a huge explosion of awesome performance once that happens. So
just
the argument. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
In terms of portability and minimal footprint, so the C++ 17 standard library has a technical reference for remove all, STD pipe, file system pipe remove all, which should be cross-platform for every platform that has the C++ 17 compatible standard library, which is a target for the build working group to get. We want to, as roughly speaking, for the build working group, we want that for Node 12. So we might get it at least for Windows, Common Linux, and Mac.
So this would be a C++ call that can essentially do rimwrap without all the logic in the user land module?
Yeah, so I pointed out in the issue that it is synchronous, it's non-ACID, so it might fail in the middle. But we can schedule it on the libuv loop. We can write like a callback and tell libuv like run it in a separate thread, so we can work around the synchronous issue. But consistency and atomicity we can't guarantee.
What could you repeat that last part, or maybe turn up your mic a little?
Trying to figure out how to do that. So I'm saying it's gonna be very hard to give consistency and atomicity guarantees.
And that's kind of like what the userland module does, right? It's just basically a loop. It's basically just does a timeout loop until the state looks good, which is janky and slow, but it does work.
So we have, at least the build working group. I think some code, I'm not sure, but I think some code in libuv does this disgusting trick where we first try to move the directory somewhere else and then delete it. So at least we can give some guarantee, but that can be, we can discuss that further, like further down the road.
I mean, RMRF, I mean, that's not an atomic operation anyway.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, what can you really expect out of it? You know, if you're going to use RMRF and it breaks halfway through, well, I mean, you should probably know what you're getting into. So there's no way we can guarantee that to be like, you know, a single atomic operation. But
it's just that that we need to be very, I think we need to be very clear on that, because Node tries to give some guarantees on most of its APIs, and this is like this is a compound operation, which is kind of unique. So at least the standard gives the output of remove all gives kind of an indication how far along did it get. It gives like a number of handles. I think it was able to delete. So like that's like a kind of a design perspective we need to keep in mind. I think we need to keep in mind.
I almost wonder if we could use that approach and then like end with a fstat or something and like have a special error if it didn't actually successfully rimwrap, but with information from how far along it got, maybe. Like, I wonder if there's a middle ground there.
I think that, let's say for like a first version 1 MVP, I think that's like the best we can do.
Yeah. Okay. I'm still kind of bullish on trying to do it at the system level if we can, just because I think it will be way more performant. But I also don't think we should continue going down the path you were on, Chris, because it looks like it was going to get pretty miserable. So
yeah. Do you have a like an issue for that?
We have the tooling issue. I wrote some notes there. It's that's tooling number 13.
Oh, is that closed?
Yeah.
Oh, weird. Okay. Oh, I see. You commented. I thought it was a new issue. Okay. Okay. Cool. And so you've linked there. So all right, great. So which
one question to the group is that, and I'm referencing FS Watch. in the sense that is it something that we're pro or against having an implementation that works only on some platforms because we're too lazy to shim it for the platforms that we still don't have C++ 17 compatible compiler for.
So which platforms are we talking about that are not going to have this?
Off the top of my head, it's probably gonna be the IBM platforms, Linux One, AIX, PowerPC, Linux on PowerPC. I'm not sure about FreeBSD, but FreeBSD anyway, in terms of Node, is tier 2 or even experimental. So Linux, we're gonna have it probably Mac, Windows, I think.
Okay, it looks like Michael's aware of this. So yeah, I don't know. I am indifferent about that. I would love to see support for this. I feel like IBM could probably throw some resources at this and try to get it figured out.
Yeah, so since it's an infrastructure, it's getting compilers onto machines. IBM is very responsive in donating time and resources to the build working group.
Mm-hmm.
If we can apply upstream pressure from actual features, it might move that along.
Okay.
I was going to say, I've talked to Isaac about this too, and he would happily update RimRaf. He doesn't like maintaining RimRaf, the library, so unlike McDir P, Isaac would happily pull in whatever we have to RimRaf. So even if we need to shim some platforms, maybe there's still an advantage to being able to use the system level stuff when we can. Just a thought.
Is this a good cadence or a good seg into the next userland shims topic?
Yeah, sounds good to me. Definitely. So I reached out to James Halliday about McDirt, and he was really not too jazzed to switch to a native implementation of it. And it made me think, it's going to be a mixed bag. I know Isaac would love to retire RimRaf, but I bet there'll be other people who have James Halliday's point of view. And I mean, it's really up to them. Like I know Sindra Sorhu switched to the native implementation in his McDirt competitor as an example. I don't know if competitor is the right word, but alternative.
Which one's that?
I think it's just McDirt Recursive or something. It's also pretty popular, and I think I saw someone updating to it. Not quite sure what the name is. I know it's made by Sindra Sorhu. Maybe it's just MakeDir.
MakeDir.
Yeah.
Make-dir. Okay.
Yeah, and I saw someone updating that to use the Node.js native implementation else I work with. I don't know if it's landed yet, but I think it is making the switch over. Oh no, it has landed. That's cool. Yeah. So all this to say, what I was going to advocate is I'd love for us to eventually start using like Node.js sanctioned libraries to provide the shims, maybe like start publishing to @Node.js on npm or something with a shim that will work on old platforms. I don't know how people feel about that.
I think that's an excellent question for the package maintenance working group.
Yeah.
There was I want to say this was in the modules working group. There's like an issue all about people going back and forth about this this Node.js namespace and what should go in there. And,
Yeah, I got super sick of that conversation.
yeah.
But it felt like the consensus was don't throw anything in that namespace on npm, maybe, and then we could use it for these shim modules. So
Was that the consensus? Because I don't know.
it didn't feel like many people. It didn't. It felt like there was more of a swell of people saying that they would rather not use the module syntax that npm currently has, but maybe it's not as much of a consensus as I was reading into. I think I stopped paying attention after it hit its 150th response or something on that thread.
I know that there is. I think it's like a standing decision that was never implemented to have the internal call modules namespaced for clarity and explicitity.
Yeah.
I don't know what's happening with that.
So I guess we can't try to call using that namespace yet. Last I saw in that thread, it was like people were moving towards colon instead of a / I thought. And like there was just some completely different syntax than npm modules, which would mean there's no naming collision concern with if we were publishing some stuff in the tooling working group.
So it is a little bit of a different use case. So it's like differentiating internal modules with sanctioned or blessed shims.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, but it seems like it would be either A, it would be extremely confusing and terrible, or B, it would be pretty awesome if they actually shared the same name.
Yeah, so. Yeah. And this is where people kind of collided, because I think it's like one option is we're actually backporting all this stuff, and I feel like it's pretty terrifying to backport some of the bigger changes. Like, are we going to backport a version of libuv and v8 that has a completely different rm-rf syntax? You know, like can that actually be backported all the way back to Node 6, right? Like, I don't know, maybe it can. Like, at what point are you not actually really backporting and you're just releasing a different node at that version number? Like,
yeah.
Well, I mean, it sounds to me like there's we can check that issue again, but it didn't sound to me like there was much clarity on what we should do. And I think, if we're going to publish our shims, and we can certainly keep them in the org, I imagine, or maybe a org. Maybe that's not even the Node.js org on GitHub. Maybe it's a different org, but that's nothing is going to stop us from doing that. If someday we can rename or should rename our modules to use a different namespace on npm, then great. But
I guess the main thing I wanted to put forward and see how other people feel is I don't think it would be a terrible idea for us to have sanctioned shimming modules rather than trying to go to everyone in the community, because I think we'll bump into more people like James Halliday. And maybe it's just better for us to have ones that we can provide to people and say, yeah, if you're targeting Node 10, here's a module that will work for you and have the exact same syntax as Node 10, right?
So,
or sorry, Node 010 and Node 10. So that's a bad example.
Right. I have one. So it's what a node environment flags or something. I don't know what I called it. But it's processed allowed node environment flags, and it's shimmed back to I think Node 6. So that landed in 10, and so it's an 8 and it's in 6. And maybe I didn't go back to 4, but anyway, it's a shim and it's on npm and it's just got my name on it, and that could conceivably be blessed by the org, and I could transfer it to some other org and we could namespace it if we want to. Or
maybe we just
that's one thing we can do.
Yeah, I kind of like that idea, but I would like to sidestep that whole argument about standard internal modules if we can possibly do it, even if like we pick a different namespace, like you say, like because that argument's gonna be happening for 7 years. But well, it's gonna be happening for a year. Let's be honest.
I mean, there's no consensus about whether or not it's okay to even put shims in the org on GitHub.
That's
so maybe we should just make a Node.js tooling org and just go with that.
I think the package maintenance group is gonna give us support. I'm assuming.
Yeah.
On some level, because that's like it's a thing now.
You're in both working groups, right, Chris? Maybe you can just feel it out.
Yeah, I'll take this back to package maintenance, and we'll see what they think. Yeah. So
on that note, we had I'm not sure it's on the agenda now, but we had that conversation in Twitter a month ago about Chokidar and FS Watch and FS events, etc. About cannibalizing parts of that like ecosystem into core, and polyfilling FS Watch to be better than it is right now. So that's like I'll open a new issue in the repo so we can like focus the discussion. But it segues directly from.
Yeah. I think that brings up an interesting point. We've kind of so far with we've only done a few things so far as the tooling group, but we've so far shied away from introducing significant chunks of JavaScript logic to shim behavior. And I think we're eventually going to want to, right? Like, should we be shying away from pulling in something like Chokader, like you say?
Not. It's we need to find I think we need to find like a balance of what should be in core. I think the main target, for as I see it, for libuv and the Node is to give a similar feature set across platforms. So if we have FS events, which fills a gap from Mac OS, I think we should polyfill that, and then leave everything else to userland. Like extra things, like I think like Chokidar does a polling if Node can't give it enough meat to work in, and I think that's well suited for userland modules.
That's interesting. Yeah, my main thing is like I'd like to if the node tooling group was working perfectly, I'd say like it's weird that there is a watch API in Node, but I would never use it because I know it's not going to work on a ton of platforms. So I immediately pull for FS Watch or Chokader or something to shim it. Like, why even have the watch API at that point? It's kind of like I'd like to, and it's I feel it's a foot gun for the community, right? Like, because if I don't know the shortcomings, I'm going to just be, oh, okay, watch, that's cool. Let's use this API method. And then one of the first pull requests that's going to come against my library is switching it for a userland module. So
it's a strange situation. I'm not well versed in what's happening because I don't work on Mac, and it's a fairly client-oriented platform. So I'm not. I think it's an excellent case for tools because like a lot of tools watch file systems.
Mm-hmm.
But like there's also, like you said, I think this whole issue brings up like FUD because also we haven't mapped like the gaps. There isn't like an exact, like we can't say this works well on Linux and Windows, and you have to use FS events if you want it on Mac.
I think what came up in that conversation too was that like some of these userland modules were made 5 years ago,
Yeah,
and the issues maybe have even been addressed, but there's just fear in the community that like, oh, this still doesn't work well on Mac. Even maybe it has been fixed on Mac. So it kind of almost becomes ritualistic. Like I have to use this.
yeah,
Same
exactly.
thing for streams, right? Like streams are way better than they used to be, but people still use a lot of probably stream helpers they don't need to use anymore.
Yeah, it's like and graceful FS and soon McDerp.
If I can just share some tooling experience on that as well. Just coming from the perspective of Rollup, I know we've been speaking about it in the Rollup project quite a bit. And it's something that Rich Harris does go on about as well, that this Watch API is very frustrating to work with. And in Rollup, by default, we use the standard Node Watch API. But the problem that happens with that is, I think, if I remember correctly, is that we're creating a handle or a watcher for each separate file because we're watching a lot of files, whereas other watches can sort of batch that load. So as you're watching everything in Node modules, for example, then it suddenly just slows down ridiculously and we get these terrible times. So then you have to switch to Chalky.does. There's kind of this experience where it works initially okay, and then it just breaks down completely and slows down your build. If I'm remembering correctly. I mean, I haven't really researched this one. I didn't know it was going to come up today. But it's a big one from a tooling perspective. I mean, in all these tools, we complain about watches. And the saddest thing about it is like the people who worked on tools like Chalky.do have traced those bugs, but those bugs haven't necessarily been all followed up. So there's kind of been the space in the middle where these things have been dropped, and we don't necessarily know exactly what those issues are to follow. But if there was a concerted effort towards patching that gap, that would be huge. And I know that a lot of tooling authors would really, really, really value that. Solving the problems. I mean, if we were to go the alternative route and endorse a user land module, like, I don't know what that would be, but just to say it's like from a tooling perspective, in tools like Rollup, it's a huge one.
I think that's a really good idea. Even like I'm really excited about features like Rimwrap, but it almost feels like Chokader is almost a clearer immediate win for the type of thing we should be doing as an initiative, which is help people in the community land the work they've done in userland modules upstream into Node, because sometimes it's just that the barrier of entry into Node made them not be able to patch these things, like you say, Guy. So we can help facilitate that, I think, with our commit bit on the Node project, and like that conversation on Twitter was great.
Yeah, even just from a signaling perspective, because I think a lot of people have a lot of apathy around Node watches, and to just start to correct that from a psychological perspective and say, well, let's take a bug and fix one small bug to do with it or something like that, and just show that there's someone picking those up in libuv or wherever they lie.
Somebody read my mind. Okay, there's that Twitter link. If we're talking about things that are more maybe pressing or more worthwhile than Rimwrap, if FS Watch is one of those things, what about? And I would say this is probably even more of a big deal. Is something like cross spawn. Like looking at that and saying, okay, why do we need cross spawn? Why doesn't spawn just work on Windows like it should? And what would it take to pull that into core?
Yeah, that makes sense.
It would be great to get someone from Microsoft involved. I know at our first meeting when we chatted at Node Interactive, there was a guy from Microsoft there. And I think a lot of these compatibility issues are on Windows. So it would be great if we could get him back or someone, because it seemed like they were interested in solving some of these issues.
Yeah, I think I know who you're talking about.
It's in the meeting notes or in the minutes.
So I think from scope perspective, it's going to be a little bit of an internal conversation between Node Core and libuv, who should fill this gap, because I'm looking at the feature set of Crosspawn, which I've never had to use, so I don't know why. Maybe because I'm thinking Windows first. And it's an interesting question. I don't have a clear intuition about where this should go.
Maybe the meta question is, like, it sounds like we have a few things that are pet things we continue to, but I mean, like a monthly meeting, we're not going to get code done in a monthly meeting. I wonder, what are some good action items we could take away to have some initial wins on some of these user land modules we'd like to start to retire? I wonder.
And I'm not sure. Just speaking from my perspective, I'm not sure that the tooling working group should venture into actual, as a group, into actual coding. It's kind of like the Node, and if you read James's comments, it's kind of like the notion that there is no roadmap, there are no goals. It's completely community driven and based on the individuals. So if any one of us wants to tackle this, obviously, but I'm not sure that how that's gonna go over. If the group as a group tries to code, because I'm a big believer that every task should have like a champion, at least somebody who's willing to actually do the work and muddle through the review process in core or libuv. Just from past experience, I can't, it's complete. It's definitely non-conclusive.
Are you saying then you don't think we need a formal roadmap? I would tend to agree with you. I mean, I feel like, if somebody's going to tackle one of these things, great. I don't think, if people want to work together on it, great. But yeah. Nobody's anybody else's boss here, so it's not like
maybe it's just better to
work on.
I'm a little bit worried that if we move the center of mass of coding outside of core, it will get diluted. I think the /node repo has a lot of power. So if we can get stuff there with a blessing of the group, I think that's the best way forward.
Mm-hmm. As opposed to what?
Starting spinning off something like /modules or how's it called, /modules canary, or even Node v8 canary, stuff that works on core without a clear champion, not in /node. So for instance, the HTTP2 started as such, but it had very clear champions, Guy and I think and James and Anatoly. So
yeah, I was going to say maybe a good starting point is we have the Node tooling repo that's just for running meetings and notes and whatnot. Maybe we could open issues up on there that are like, here's an idea. We think it would be really good to move Chokader into Node Core. Here's some reasons why. Here's the Twitter conversation. Here's what we think it would look like if we have any other comments. But then it's up to, if anyone in the community wants to pick it up, we can help, like you say, champion it, and we can provide that suggest. And then it provides a nice place for someone who wants to contribute to the Node project to go, what are some actual meaty things I could be doing that I know I'll have the support of a few contributors to help land, right? without any of us actually doing it.
But I think that's a good idea. But how do we make?
If somebody, maybe I'll do something. Like if somebody wants to do it as an individual, and get the team's support, I think that will both come across great and has higher chances of success than if we do something, we decide as a group to do it, and then it falls between chairs.
How do we make people aware, though, of the issues that are there? Because like the tooling working group is just a tiny little corner of like the larger Node project. So how do we like raise awareness of those issues?
That's a very good question. It started something similar, spun out of core, and it hasn't really picked up. Like in core, there are a couple of issues that where did they put it? That kind of have this sort of soft consensus, but nobody has picked up, like kind of orphans, and it's very hard to answer your question.
I wonder, like, I think there are ways, though. Like, I mean, a bunch of us are Twitter loudmouths, so we're like, we can at least kind of like evangelize it as things people could be working on. And there's other initiatives, like there's the mentorship working group, honestly, and having a set of like pretty meaty things for a mentee to work on is actually great because you're kind of reaching like, well, what am I going to work with this person on for the next 3 months? So I mean, I think working with the mentorship group could make a lot of sense. And I'm on that committee as well, so I'm happy to float that there. That immediately comes to mind for me.
I guess there is a little bit of overlap too with the package maintenance group, which seems to have a lot of like momentum behind it. So that could be another option.
To promote some of these issues there?
Yeah, because some of them I think are going to be related to packages that are pretty old or outdated, or where the authors don't really have a desire to update them.
Right. I mean, I feel like the best way to get people interested is to send pull requests. Essentially, people see it, and then everybody will fight for 100 comments or whatever. That's how you get attention. So,
that makes sense to me.
And if we can, I don't know, if we can find somebody to do this stuff, then great. But I don't feel like we should. I don't quite understand what you were saying about we shouldn't be coding or something, or maybe you said something else. It was like we shouldn't be coding outside of core.
Yeah, sure. I think it's based on what you said. The best way to get traction and feedback is to actually submit a PR to core. So as much as we can push efforts into that, I think that's the best way forward.
Absolutely. I mean, somebody needs to do the code. I'm not betting on somebody who is not, involved in this group to do any of these things. If it happens, that would be a nice surprise. But opening issues on Node Core without opening feature requests on Node Core without an associated has not been a positive experience for me in the past. So, we could create issues and try to drum that up, but ultimately either somebody from this group or somebody else who's interested needs to do it. We can certainly try to get the word out that, hey, this is what we're working on and this is what we'd like to be doing. I guess I would not jump to creating an issue or whatever right away.
Yeah, I do think if we have something pretty clearly defined, like Chokadur again, I think it could be good to rate it up. And like I was saying, just because maybe what we do is we help bring someone who's just getting involved in Node Core. We help them build the issue by going and like as soon as they get the pull request open on Core, we can come in and say we're really excited about this. This meets our tooling group initiative. We're really supportive of this engineer who's doing this work. And I think that can lead away. That can really help the person land their first pull request, can help lend legitimacy, make the conversation less of an argument. I don't know. I see where you're both coming from, I think is what I'm saying. Like there's advantages to both approaches. I have rose-colored goggles on.
Ben, do you think we should move on to?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I think we have some pretty. It sounds like we have some pretty good thoughts there, right? Meeting cadence. Yeah, we only have, I guess, 12 minutes left. This is an hour, right?
Yeah.
I know there were some concerns around it conflicting with other meetings, right, Chris? Like, where did we land? Where did you end up landing?
Yeah, so I think originally we wanted to do every other week, and at this time, and it turns out that we had to move it because we conflicted with the benchmarking working group. And so I moved it forward a week, but then we conflicted with the benchmarking working group again. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? Well, what's going on is the benchmarking working group meets every 3 weeks. And so
Gotcha.
we can't meet every other week at this time. And, Jordan raised an issue or made a comment. He was like, well, why can't we just why can we only, stream one thing at a time? Like, why can't we pay YouTube to stream multiple things? Like, how does that work? What's going on there? And so somebody should follow up on that. Maybe I'll follow up on that with Michael Dawson and ask him who to ask or whatever. But I would rather not meet every 3 weeks. I like the idea of 2 weeks, but unfortunately, that will cause a problem.
So you're thinking a month, every monthly meeting right now? Is that where you're landing?
Well, no, I would like to meet every 2 weeks, but right now we're set up to meet every 3 weeks because anything else, it has to be week mod 3 equals 0, or else we're going to conflict with benchmarking working group.
That's like an interview problem. All right.
Yeah.
That works for me. That works for me though. 3 weeks is like a little bit more often than monthly. That's good.
I can live with that for right now, but I would like to see if we can solve that problem otherwise. And creating a doodle poll and having everybody try to vote on a workable time, I feel is like the ultimate pain in the neck. And so I'd rather not do that since it seems quite a few people can make this time. So
that makes sense.
I'll follow up on the I'll see if I can solve this problem. So
then TC39. This was an interesting one.
That
little Dan did end up joining, did they?
I don't think so.
No.
Not around.
Yeah, we basically had someone, we had Daniel who's involved in TC39, just basically asking if there's overlap between the types of work we want to do as a tooling initiative and some of the standards that TC39 is working on. Sorry, I'm rereading the thread so I can get better insight.
It sounded like he just wanted to ask us some questions.
Yeah. I mean, there's some, like, it's kind of interesting, like, does code transformation potentially have to, would this be the purview of the tooling committee? I mean, it would be worth it. I think we should try to, no real action item, let's just try to actually have a conversation with Dan sometime.
Yeah, maybe we can get him to come into the next meeting or something.
Yeah. Makes sense to me.
I think it comes from I think he's looking at it from actual applications like Rollup or NCC or stuff like that that cause upstream pressure into the standard. things like modules, and that's how I see it, which is interesting, which is like stuff that I've been thinking about, like can changes in the language allow for better tooling? Like for instance, modules and tree shaking and things like that. That's like an interesting use case.
Cool. Makes sense to me. Is that stuff we care about? Is that?
I mean, in our initial meeting, we talked about things like package managers and build tools as the sort of things we were interested in facilitating.
It's something that I'm a strong believer in. The whole Next.js NCC concept, serverless, lambdaizing everything, and a little bit in a similar vein, I've had some discussions about like upstreaming things like Acorn or Sprima or Babel into Node, and making it, like finding the way to make it more language forward, because at the moment it even lags behind V8 in the sense of what new language features Node can implement. And I think that's like a really big chunk of where tooling work is being done in the ecosystem. And I think it's an interesting intersection. I don't have like a really thought out,
I totally agree, because I mean, like Babel has a really close relationship with TC39 because Babel is used to test how the language would feel with new proposals. So it kind of feels like a natural extension to have Node to have a close relationship with Babel to, like, okay, if it's actually an adopted standard, it's just not in V8 yet. Is it shimmed in Node even? Maybe that's a terrible idea, but
I think there were.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which feature is that, but like there were like actual conversations like of people wanting to shim stuff that is like in V8 7.3, but we want it right now. So yeah. It's like it's happening. It's like people are taking that idea seriously.
That makes sense.
I agree that we should definitely support these tools. I guess I'm struggling to see how it's like language level concerns are really in scope.
I think like ad hoc. I think like in the sense that a lot of tooling work is done around transpilers and packagers, and it's been in my mind like a big rift, or I don't want to say rift, but like a big gap between work that's done on Node Core and work that's done on all those tools. And there was, I think, too little intersection between these two domains. And I think it's an interesting place to, let's say, think about. Like you said, I'm not sure exactly how.
One thing that comes to mind for me is like we have this whole MJS thing. Like some people want MJS, some people don't want MJS, and NPM floated a patch that added ESM support a couple years ago using Acorn, and the idea was that you'd have like an Acorn compiler sitting in the Node core codebase that could handle this new language construct. So it was a way to say, hey, here's an alternative to this. Here's an alternative to not being able to support this language feature. We could do some pre-compilation on the JavaScript that's coming into Node. I don't know. It was interesting. Like,
But by the way, Node has Acorn. It's used for top-level await.
Gotcha. Yeah. See, that's interesting. And is Acorn, like, is it worth using Acorn? Should we be using Babel? It's an interesting conversation.
Again, like Chris said, I'm not sure exactly where this becomes tooling, but it feels like this is like the closest.
That makes sense to me. We only have 2 minutes left. I just wanted to call it. I have a cool pull request open on Node Core to replace test coverage with the native V8 built-in test coverage, and it's like ready to land pretty much. I'm excited about it.
Nice.
So right now, test coverage uses a build step in Node that transpiles all of the source code, and it takes 20 minutes for the test suite to run, and it has to replace all the JavaScript with different JavaScript. And now that's not needed. So I'm really excited about that. Is that Node tooling? I think kind of.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
A lot of intersection with build, but coverage is the tool.
Yeah.
I think that's a happy end, both to the meeting and to the story, that coverage has become a core feature.
Yeah. Now I can actually work on other stuff too. Cool. Well, I don't want to go too far over, but it seems like we have a lot to. I don't know. It feels productive. I think as we start having these meetings every 3 weeks, we'll lose track of these threads less. That's my hope. How are you feeling, Chris?
Great. Yeah, I was just thinking about, okay, how can I pull this code coverage thing into Mocha and make it happen like with a flag?
Yeah. I showed the thread in the document if you want to take a look at it.
I'll take a look. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, right now we're scheduled in another 3 weeks, but I will update that if anything changes, and if anybody wants to talk about something at the next meeting, all you need to do is put the tooling-agenda label on that issue, and it can be anywhere. It doesn't have to be in the tooling repo. You can put it in any repo in the Node.js org, and it will end up in the meeting notes and the meeting announcement and all that crap. So please do that if there's something that you'd like to talk about.
Cool. Thanks for getting all this stuff in motion, Chris.
Well, thank you for attending. I'm because we don't have invites, and that's another problem I'd like to solve. But because we don't have invites, I really have no idea who's going to show up. So it's good to see plenty of people here. So, all right. Well,
just as we do this in several working groups, when you open the meeting issue, people should thumb up or thumb down if they're gonna show up.
Okay.
Well, we can use that. All right.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye, everybody.